The 10-minute talent rant is live. I'm James Hornick, joined by Jeff Smith, and we are on the clock. The 10-minute talent rant is our ongoing series where we break down things that are broken in the talent acquisition space, maybe even pitch a solution or two. Before we dig in, all of our content can be found on talentinsights.hirewell.com. Here we go. This week's topic: how will the recruiting gold rush end?
It's a good one.
All right. Let me kind of lay this up a little bit. I'm gonna, I like to assume that everyone following us is very aware of kind of what's happening in the market, but just in case, this is kind of our prediction show. Even though we're doing another show after this, we realize we're kind of at that point of the year.
Yep.
All right. Every year, placing perm or contract recruiters at HireWell at our clients internally is like our number 2 most frequently done placement. So right behind, so it's software developers number 1 every year, recruiters number 2. We know what we're talking about. We do a ton of this. It's a huge area of business for us. We pulled some actual data just to give you some context. Like, I don't want to say, guys, the demand for recruiting is insane, but let's actually illustrate this. Salary inflation between Q1 and Q3 this year, 37% increase for internal recruiters. So Q1 was the average starting salary, all levels, all locations, 86,000. That went to 102,000 in Q2, 118,000 in Q3. That's in 2 quarters. It made that big of an impact.
Yep.
Secondly, remote hiring. Now, this is also key too, because this means people just have more choices because the demand is so much higher. So back in Q2, like 50% of the placements we made for internal recruiters were remote. Yep. Q3 was 95%. Like, everyone has given up trying to find recruiters that work at a fixed location.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's following right behind all of the other trends. We saw it happen really first with the software engineering and the IT sector, and now it's bled into everything else, but specifically for us, recruiting. Like, for me, the specificity of everything in regards to recruiting, like, never really made sense to anyone with half a brain moving, like, for the last 10 years at least. Like, the day I'm old enough to remember my mentor saying that they literally mailed resumes back and forth like postage. They put ads out in newspapers, and like, that's how small the world was. But like, these days of Rolodexes and mail and printing resumes out on fancy paper, it's all over. And I think the other thing too is like, well, I think firstly, it was always housed in corporate HR. So like, everything really like was brought down to the level of that, which was like, everybody's got to be on site 5 days a week. Like, just lots of like pent up resentment. Like, what are we doing here? And then the pandemic hits, everything changes. The market picks back up. There's lots of recruiters who probably got, dumped 2 to 3 months into this thing. And then boom, they're the hottest commodity in town. Yeah, the same arms race that occurred with, like we said, all of these developers, it ramped up and is arguably faster and the fastest market on the town right now.
So what's happening is, like, you've got your on-site recruiters are getting courted by Google, Facebook. They're getting courted by everyone else in Silicon Valley, like our friends over at Affirm and Stripe and places like that. They'll pay top dollar. They'll allow anyone to work from anywhere. Yep. And maybe even bigger, more importantly, everyone they're hiring, they'll pay top dollar for, because I think that's the other missing part. Recruiters like a job that's easy. That's I don't want to say easy, but that's a very sellable pitch. Yeah. And if everyone you're trying to recruit for, you can pay out high salaries and recruit from anywhere, that's just a more appealing job to take on, regardless of what your own comp is. So anyways.
Yeah. So we see 3 ways this kind of all plays out, so I guess it begs the question, where do you think the chips fall, James?
All right. So scenario 1 is just demand continues to skyrocket. Totally possible. There are just aren't enough recruiters to meet demand. There aren't enough recruiters to meet demand now. So I think this actually, in this scenario, which is where we currently are, if this kind of continues, 1, the tech enablement. I think the biggest reason why recruiting technology has lagged so far behind technology in other sectors, because there was never a critical need to actually innovate.
Agree.
Like, it's like if you just wind the clock back a little bit, like, recruiters spun their wheels and everybody was okay with it. Everyone was fine with, like, everyone, like, they were the least respected division in a lot of companies. Their time was spent inefficiently. No one really cared. It's just the classic, what would you say it is that you do here kind of situation? Whatever. People, they got it done because it was kind of just out of sight, out of mind. So it wasn't where the tech spend went.
I love office space plugs. Look, now the business is getting impacted, like for real. And apparently bottom lines matter, which, jobs sit open for 6 months. And like, really, the only way out of this, if you're not going to go remote, is to overpay. Like, those are the two main critical levers that people use to make decisions. Third being like who their manager is going to be. At some point, companies are going to realize that they don't need to lean on as many recruiters, because technology invariably will take some of that time load off. We're not saying that automation is going to replace the human element of recruiting, but if recruiters are spending less and less time on a spam platform like LinkedIn has become nowadays, you can get a hell of a lot more done. And shameless plug time, like, this is half of the thing that we're trying to do with our business, and build a technology component that's going to allow for some of that to happen.
Yeah. The other aspect of this too is that just more remote, less borders, more offshoring. I think that, like, as you kind of mentioned before, recruitment used to always be seen as an in-person thing. There was a thought you had to be on site to be a good recruiter, to meet with the teams. There was also like that local element with like having your Rolodex because you're in a small, tight-knit community. Yeah. But I mean, there's a reason why our placements this year in the internal recruitment space went from 50% to 95% remote. It's because some companies suddenly realize it doesn't matter. It's like, and while we're remote, like, we're mostly looking at people kind of around the United States, but who's to say it even stops kind of at our own internal borders, right? It's like any like able-bodied human with an internet connection, a computer, a particular set of skills can do this job.
Another great movie reference.
Yeah. Pumping them out.
So scenario 2, like, the demand tanks. This is the opposite of what we just discussed. Like, we're still in a pandemic after all. I honestly see a mass exodus from this profession in general. Like, we're now benchmarking at least internal salaries. Like, let's keep it on the corporate side for one. Like, inventory is going to want 125, 130, 140K. Like, once this market settles, or in this case tanks, like, no one's going to go back to the 80 to 90K benchmarking. Like, recruiters are 100% going to take their talents elsewhere. Like, they're going to move to marketing. They're going to move to customer success, like those transferable markets. And then honestly, like, I do see a world where recruiting goes back to being the second class, corporate citizens. I've been around long enough to see this kind of happen once, twice, and I'm not stupid enough to think that it can't happen again.
Yeah.
And then finally, like, the best recruiters are always going to come back to the external side. It's where the money can be made. And frankly, there's a ton less headaches.
I think the issue I have in that scenario, it's totally plausible that the demand tanks, but there's too many lasting effects of all this that are permanent, right? So even if the demand does like completely take a nosedive, there's certain things that aren't really going to change. Scenario 3, which I think is the most plausible, demand incrementally decreases. So it doesn't totally tank, but kind of reaches an equilibrium. At some point, I believe like the Great Resignation is going to shake out, right?
No doubt.
And I don't even think it's kind of relevant to this, but like people are going to leave their company. That company they left, they're going to have to backfill. That next company they left has to backfill, so on and so on. But the issue is that, like, there is an ever increasing demand for devs, product types, marketers, sales. It's just going to continue, because if you look back at what's happened in the last year or so, like, more and more investment dollars, more and more VC money gets pumped into these kind of recession-proof industries, and it's they're going after and increasing into skill sets that there's already kind of a strain on, which is causing the demand for kind of recruitment. So I think no matter what, the demand for recruitment is going to be far higher than it was pre-pandemic, even if things kind of taper back.
Yeah, and even in that scenario, like, recruiters recruit. We don't do swim charts. We don't do hardcore project management. Like, when volume inevitably decreases based on tech enablement or whatever, you get thrown right back into the slow burn corporate hell of trying to figure out what the heck do you do with these folks.
I have 2 conclusions come from this. First, I think there will never be a permanent, sustained need for high quality, high paid internal recruiters at scale. Specifically at scale is what I mean. So you need your core staff, right? But in those situations where it's always going to be a binge-based industry, there's always going to be a binge and there's going to be a taper back. So spikes and slow periods, it's why the entire external recruitment model exists, right? Secondly, I believe that because this ongoing demand is just going to be permanently higher, there's more fluidity in markets. People are going to change jobs more often now than they ever have before. It's not going to go back to, I mean, if anything, 10 years are going to be shorter and shorter. People have more and more time to interview. The classic high fee contingent models are just going to be too pricey and just unreliable to actually manage any of these spikes. You know, I think that ongoing successful external recruiting is going to have much more of a consultative approach where they actually can solve the entire problem, which is really what companies want, not just glorified sourcing and resume mills.
Yeah. I mean, it's why our on-demand practice is blowing up. It's, you know, our way of entering the RPO market. We prefer it be with us, but anyone who's like committed to this space has seen it explode. You know, I'm not going to name our competitors, but I mean, there's plenty of us that have seen our business increase, you know, tenfold because of this exact thing.
Now, you bring up what is the on-demand market, in case anyone has no idea, because a lot of people aren't even aware of this model. So I'll break it down real simple. Internal recruiters get to work for an organization like HireWell, who's got a supply of cool ass clients that are always having spiking demand. So they get to do internal work. They get to work like internal recruiters at the best of times when they have the biggest kind of project loads and most kind of exciting things driving hiring. They don't have to worry about the sales aspects of agency life, which is what turns a lot of people off to agency recruiting, is the kind of that component, you being a prime example. They don't have to worry about finding new contracts if they're a contract recruiter. You know what I mean? It's all kind of part of the job. It's all kind of baked in. And then companies get, on the other side, companies get experienced people who can hit the ground running during spikes without having to roll the dice on trying to interview for and find contract recruiters, which can be very difficult to do.
Yeah. I mean, there's comfort in finding a great partner with anything, you know, let alone recruiting services. So I think when customers know where to find quality service and the need, that like they buy it. So I just think that good recruiters love to work on projects that aren't run of the mill. And it's why, you know, we're fortunate to be in a moment right now where we can kind of be a little choosy, and we know that that will end, but I do think it's allowed us to refine like the way that we sell to your point, like show off that consultative side to just filling the jobs as well, right? So the other thing too is good recruiters are always going to be able to make money on the external side. So I don't want to say it's the only reason we do this, recruiters, but kind of is.
I mean, isn't money the only reason why anybody does any job? Let's be honest.
So like when wages decrease for this market swing, which we touched on before, like the money's going to be back on this side. So look, customer, you don't want to worry about Mary's career development after the hiring surge. We'll hire Mary.
Yeah. In short, that's your future. Better recruitment tech, more remote, more dedicated service options, less contingent. It's going to go bye-bye. And if demand really, really, really does tank, then everyone's going to quit recruiting anyway.
There it is.
Right. I'd say we're short on clock. We're way over, but who cares? That's a wrap for this week. Thanks for tuning into the 10-Minute Talent Rant, part of the Talent Insights series, which is always available for replay on talentinsights.hirewell.com, as well as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon. Jeff, thanks again as always. Everyone out there, see you soon.